Hello, Petros, brackets, and Dan. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of your career so far? How did you end up getting to Recreo? Obviously, I've done a bit of research on Petros, but a little bit of background information on the two of you and your current roles.
All right, I'll start. So how do I describe it? So superannuation is pretty much what I've worked in since I left university. It's been I won't call it a calling, but it's certainly been what I've chosen to do in life to a certain extent. So in terms of my work history, I've worked over at Barclays in London for a while in their wealth division. Originally at Prudential in Sydney, I've worked in, but most of the career has been within CBA and most of it at Colonial First State, which is one of our bigger retail super funds in Australia. Okay. Did a stint there of, I think, all up about 18 years or so in the kind of solution design, product design space, going through project management and delivery into more of the design side of things, and being a solution consultant for, I think, the last 6-7 years of my tenure there. So moving over to Recreo, I came in doing a lot of the same kind of stuff where it was more delivery focused and we're trying to get the product across the line, right? So these things are a massive undertaking when you build an enormous package of software like this. And so we got the runs on the board, but now we've delivered it. It's about what's the next stage? What are we doing next? How do we step up to the plate to be the best platform in the market? We're obviously the newest and the most agile and flexible because of the way we've designed it. But how do we build out the feature set? So I think guys like Petros and I that have had a lot of experience working on a lot of different systems, we're going to lead the way in making sure that the features, the things that the system can actually do outside of the minimum compliant kind of focus that we had to go live, where do we push it next? How do we make sure it's digital, that it's configurable, it's scalable, all that kind of stuff that is the next generation of platforms rather than just being a system that can do administration.
For sure. And Petros.
Okay. So I've got roughly 25 years of experience in software development and systems engineering. Funnily enough, my first job out of university was working in defence. So I had a job straight out of uni working on, funnily enough, something completely unrelated, submarine combat systems. So it was kind of interesting in that I went from a world of like really high discipline, really high engineering standards you had to adhere to make any sort of changes, just given the criticality of systems like that where, if they fail, effectively you can lose 200 lives like that. So so I spent the 5 years of my life working on defence systems and in those sorts of environments, systems engineering, software engineering. Then had an opportunity to go and work for a financial services software company. And then that kind of led to the next phase of my career, which was effectively working in financial institutions like CBA, like Westpac, a bit of a stint at the stock exchange as well, but working on more of those mission critical, financial services systems. And a large number of those years were just in wealth in general and superannuation systems to a large degree as well, given the importance of superannuation within the wealth industry in Australia as well. So that's a bit about me. Joined Recreo back in September of last year. Having come from a big bank environment for the last 10 to 15 years, it just sounded like an exciting, nimble, new environment, maybe a little bit less bureaucracy than the bigger institutions. So, it just sounded like an exciting place doing some really innovative, good things and was really drawn to it.
That's really cool. I guess throughout a career in finance, I suppose your employers think that, well, if he can help build a submarine that doesn't blow up, I trust him to look after my money.
What, what was the testing?
Yeah, not necessarily. Yeah. No, I think there's some disciplines there, but in some ways, you can't apply those disciplines fully, because if you did, you'd probably break the bank. No pun intended there. You know what I mean? The standards there are fit for purpose for what they're doing, but sometimes in finance, you've got to take a little bit more risk in software development and try things that, I guess it's the new mantra as well, that you've got to experiment a bit and learn from your failures. It's just the problem in defence is failures are very expensive. So you've got it's kind of two worlds there, if you know what I mean.
For sure. Absolutely. Must be nice having a bit more kind of flexibility. Sorry, Dan, you go.
I'll have to talk to you about that, Petros. I'm kind of curious how that stuff hangs together when you're dealing with defence. What's your test plan look like?
Test plans are typically this thick. So,
We can take that offline. I'm pretty curious. So.
Yeah.
The thing that drew me to Recreo was the fact that there hasn't really been any new platforms in the market for a long time that have got good traction. There's no one entering the market. It's an incredibly hard thing to do, to build a software platform like this that can manage such a huge number of processes and do it well. So when I found out that this company was attempting to do it, I was initially a bit how do you say it? I wasn't not scared, but I thought, Jesus, why? Why are you trying to build one? It's so risky and so hard. Like, people have tried and failed. You burn thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours trying to put this stuff together, but Recreo have actually done it. And when I joined in January last year, they were probably, I'd say 75% of the way. They'd spun wheels for a few years. They'd set deadlines that were just unachievable. But it's built momentum over time. And so when I came in, it was really sprinting towards the line. A lot of work still to do, but it had become a reality, which was kind of mind-boggling to me that a company this small could actually do it.
Right, for sure. For the benefit of our readers, would one of you mind kind of essentially outlining from a very layman's perspective, like what superannuation is and how Recreo's kind of platform is, the value that creates and kind of the purpose that serves?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So superannuation generally in Australia is it's a mandated government initiative. You call them pensions in the UK. Essentially, it's for savings, right? So as the population gets older, the governments are trying to arbitrage the growth in essentially welfare, retirement pensions, by forcing savings during the life of someone's employment. Makes a lot of sense. And it's spawned trillion-dollar industries all over the world. It's a massive undertaking. It was a big hit, especially on employers in the first place in Australia when the initial superannuation legislation came in, which I think was in '92 from memory. And the employers basically had to stump up another, I think at the time it was 3% to everyone's wages, which obviously suppressed wages through the industries. But now it's come full circle where we've got this massive pool of cash sitting there, which creates buffers through the economy. It's a fantastic, safety net in a lot of ways. It's spawned a lot of investment because those dollars are always looking for a place to land as well. It has to be invested. So that's funded infrastructure through the country. It's kept the share market probably a lot more buoyant than it would have been without it. There's tons of benefits. And what Recreo brings to the show really is we're the first one in the cloud. So what we've tried to do, superannuation systems have been around for a long time, since the 90s. But a lot of people built their own at the time. So it was an evolving beast, and everyone's ended up with this big, long chain of systems that have been built on top of each other to manage this stuff. It's really hard to keep that stuff updated, to get it working proficiently, because it's all band-aided together. You think of, it's not like a system.
I think I think the phrase I heard earlier today was Frankenstacks.
Frankenstacks, yeah. Yeah, it's the spaghetti, bowl of spaghetti. It's a massive mess, of things that are touching and connecting with each other. So this is a clean slate. This is an attempt to build it to modern standards, to actually build it in one package. So we've got workflow, registry, front end, all built on the same technology, more or less, and all integrated quite cleanly. You look at some of these companies that are dragging the chain of legacy, and they're spending $80 million a year upkeeping all these old systems. They can't do what they need them to do.
Right. I actually had a quote from Andrew Bain, who said that about OneTrust, that you've released something very cutting edge into a market that is crowded with legacy platforms. I was wondering if you could speak to, I think you mentioned it a little bit a moment ago, but could speak some more to the kind of the pain points that are created by having these kind of legacy superannuation systems, and maybe contrast that a bit with the this kind of the solutions and service that Recreo provides.
Might throw that one to you, Petros.
Yeah, well, it's a complex ecosystem, as Dan alluded to. There's multiple superannuation providers in Australia, so ranging from, there's industry super providers who typically have superannuation funds for a specific sector, like in our case, the mining industry, for example, is one of our customers. There's other industry super funds around health services or retail workers. And then you've got the big retail funds offered by the banks typically that are more for-profit type setups. So each one of those providers over the last 30 or 40 years that Super's been running have either, as Dan alluded to, built their own bespoke systems. There's a couple of big vendors as well, like I think FNZ is one that's probably familiar in the UK market as well, that has recently acquired a superannuation vendor in Australia. But you've got these multiple vendors there as well. And I think just the phasing of it now, like 30, 40 years into it, a lot of these systems developed by vendors especially, and specifically the in-house ones, are based on old, in some cases, COBOL mainframes, or some of the ones I dealt with at the banks are built on Power Builder front ends. They're typically deployed in-house, so there's a lot of infrastructure overhead that needs to be managed by the companies hosting these as well. And not really, and that they'll kind of built and designed in the era before cloud. So it's very difficult for them to take or take advantage of some of the benefits of cloud as well. Like I know, having come from a bank managing superannuation systems and vendors, one of my biggest overheads there was just the infrastructure side of things, like making sure operating systems were patched, you're on the latest version of the database, your operating system was in support, and just the hardware boxes that you typically need to run these environments is just an enormous cost. So what we can do at Recreo, and it's something I've never seen in my work history before, is if we need a superannuation environment to run this system, we can just spin it up, rapidly in the cloud. And to give you an example, like I've just come from one of the banks where we were doing project planning where all we needed was an environment to do some testing. And it was a 6-week lag time to provision that. And I won't go into the hundreds of thousands of dollars to just simply provision an environment where we can run a superannuation system just in test mode. Whereas with Recreo, we can spin one up in, I think we've got it down to days now, but ideally I think we're setting ourselves aggressive targets around you can just spin this environment up in minutes, right? And I think those advantages are just too good to ignore. And that's where I think a lot of the legacy players just can't compete or keep up.
For sure. Fantastic. Well, I mean, there's no denying that this is quite a historic project, being so far kind of ahead of the curve in this industry that's full of so many legacy options. I think, Dan, you mentioned a little bit before about when you arrived at Recreo, there was some kind of spinning of wheels. I was wondering if you guys would like to maybe speak to some of the challenges and I guess the whole kind of the process of designing and building OneTrust and kind of the timeline of that.
Well, so from what I can gather, and I started in January last year, but the project has been going, from best I can make out, 2014.
Wow.
And if you think of the scenarios and the complexity in managing this volume of money and these volumes of members or customers, it's kind of mind-boggling after working on them for so many years. Thinking of building one from scratch to me was a pretty scary prospect. I gather that in the first 3 years, they were spinning wheels and they were finding it very hard to come up with what you might be able to hang your hat on and say that's compliant, because superannuation is so rigorously legislated. It's a massive barrier to entry for anyone that's trying to disrupt the industry. It just takes so long and so much money and manpower to actually figure all this stuff out, to build it from scratch. So it was a massive challenge for those guys, obviously. But there were some new people that came in, I think around 2018, and they really grabbed hold of it and quite brutally prioritised the work. So really got things organised, and then added a lot of manpower on top and a lot of funding, and really got the train moving. So that by the time I joined in January, they were really, as I said, sprinting towards the line. They were almost there. It took us another, 7 months after that, 8 months to land it. And it was pretty intense, but it was a wild ride, let me tell you.
For sure, I bet. Awesome. Petros, do you want to speak to that one as well, or shall we keep on trucking on?
I think the only thing I'll add is I view superannuation as it's effectively an investment vehicle, but with a tax structure overlaid around it to incentivise people to save, to compel employers to contribute to savings. Mm-hmm. But that tax structure is not only very complex, but it's constantly evolving as well, because government is always seeking to tweak it, improve it, make it better for members, for superannuation account holders, if you like. So It's just a very rapidly moving target as well, if you know what I mean. So it just emphasises the complexities that Dan alludes to when he says it's very difficult to build a superannuation registry that's compliant and adheres to all aspects of the legislation. So, so the guys in the past working on this, I think, have done an incredible job to get it where it is.
Yes, that's awesome. I mean, that is a huge achievement, it sounds like. How would you? So I think you spoke to a little bit to that kind of that brutal prioritization that happened back in 2018, and that was obviously a little bit before your guys' time. But I suppose the development of such a huge project like this kind of has that necessitated a sort of a digital transformation within Recreo itself, and kind of how would you kind of characterize the way in which you're working with your own to develop your own, I suppose, in-house capabilities in order to better support this system as you go forward and try to kind of expand it and grow it?
I'll give my perspective there. It's interesting you say, did it force a digital transformation? Where I like to think, and I wasn't here, but I think from what I've seen, I think Recreo was quite a digitally aware and already transformed company. I suspect what happened around 2018 was it was more we were invested in by an entity that really wanted to develop a superannuation platform for their needs. And what I think that drove was more just focus and better prioritisation, better processes. So I think I get the sense it was more the focus on those elements, just process, prioritise, run disciplined projects to deliver something, and a really clear vision in terms of what's needed to fulfil a specific business's needs. And that's really what drove where we are today, over and above a digital transformation per se.
For sure.
Yeah, I think
that you might have a different view, mate. I'm keen to hear.
Yeah, there's elements of it, right? So when they were building it, they obviously had their eyes on the future, but at the same time, they were very focused on the here and now, because you've got a delivery date. You're under intense pressure to meet that date, make sure it's compliant, meet with the regulators, make sure that everything's in line so that you can actually go into market, so you can put this thing in production and manage hundreds of millions of dollars through it. There's enormous pressure to get that stuff done. When I'm talking about the eye on the future that they had, it was late 2018 when, because up until then they'd been thinking about it as what we call a local deployment. So you would actually run it in a data center at the company that was using it. And one of the guys at the time said, we should be doing this in the cloud. This is crazy to try and put this on local infrastructure. So they spent quite a long time re-engineering all the work that they'd done so that it could work in the cloud, and getting in the expertise so that we could get it there and get it done properly. And so that was the first step. And I think a really important step for us was the decision to focus on cloud rather than hardware. But now we're pushing, where do we go next? And so when we talk about digital transformation, it's about digital comms, it's about segmentation, messaging, member engagement. How do we make things as simple as possible for not just the admin staff that are going to use our system, but the end members, because that's where our shared interest is for clients and ourselves. And there's going to be a lot of focus over the next year to make sure that our system is best of breed and can do all the stuff that we need it to do, that'll put it in front of its competitors.
Yes. That's rad. To speak a little bit to that kind of the cloud native aspect of OneTrust, I was wondering if you could kind of go into a little bit more detail about the cloud architecture, and I suppose some of the functionality that can give.
I think you want me to take this one, Dan?
Yeah, I'm handing that over. You can't tell, but I was looking at you on screen.
Please take the technology.
Yeah, so we run on Amazon, so Amazon Web Services. Got server instances there, and we try to take advantage of any add-on services there also. So we've got CloudWatch monitoring. We run it in a scale-in, scale-out mode to take advantage of those capabilities of Amazon. So effectively what we've got is it's a Microsoft .NET technology stack sitting on a Microsoft SQL Server database. So pretty much the sort of technology components you'd see in thousands of other applications around the world, but obviously running on the cloud. Amazon EC2 instances. We've got front ends there developed using modern frameworks such as Angular, and other bits and pieces in there as well. So some, in some ways a traditional technology stack, but obviously architected and designed to run in the cloud with all the benefits that brings you in terms of being able to rapidly spin up an environment, increase its capacity, decrease its capacity and throughput, and do all those neat things that you'd expect there as well. And obviously a big part of that is just being able to spin up development environments, test environments really rapidly, UAT environments for our customers. We take an approach of we don't try to build things that are available as commodity services. We just try to utilise what's out there and what's fit for purpose. One of the things I'm trying to push a lot more as well is don't build something that you can just buy or consume that's available off the shelf.
For sure. To speak to your customers as well, you've both mentioned this as well, the benefits of being able to spin up and spin down and adjust the scale of your offering. Is that something that you're seeing your customers take advantage of a lot as you acquire your first round of big customers? Are you seeing a lot of that kind of flexibility from the way they're using your service?
Absolutely, and I can give one example where I think this was only my first couple of months here at Recreo, but our current customer, due to the intense user acceptance testing they were doing for some of our releases, actually found that they wanted a second UAT environment for user acceptance testing. And I think we had one up and running for them in a couple of weeks, and that was not a full-time effort either. That was resources working on other stuff in the background, provisioning another environment for them as well. And I think since then we've gotten quicker at provisioning those environments as well. And again, for me, that's a big eye-opener. Again, coming from a bank where a new environment would have taken us a couple of months to provision by the time you ordered hardware in, got networks set up, opened up firewalls, deployed software, got it all installed. A sort of days to spin up an environment versus months is just such a massive advantage.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think the hardest, or one of the hardest things for us now is not so much spinning up an environment, which anecdotally I've heard we can do in kind of half an hour. We can create a container and put it online. It's actually making sure that all the configuration's right and that the integration that we need to other systems is set up. So that the environment spinning up is almost trivial now in itself, which you couldn't do that back in the 90s.
Yeah. and another thing to not forget is the capital costs as well. Like at a bank, it's not just spin up an environment, it's buy servers, buy licenses. And so you've got this massive capital hit up front to spin up something that in theory, you might only want to be using for 4 weeks, right? And then What do you do with that once that demand's gone? Whereas with us, it's using cloud, it's pay as you go. So spin it up, pay as you go. We don't need it anymore, turn it off, and the cost goes away. So there's those advantages there that I just think are just too immense to ignore moving forward for anybody, not just for Recreo, but for anybody out there doing what we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, we live in that everything is a service age. So I haven't bought an MP3 of music in over a decade now. So yeah, it's for sure.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could touch a little bit on cybersecurity, because obviously in the past, if you set up something that was on-prem for a customer, some of that stuff would all be contained within their firewall, and if someone broke in and got it, that would be in a sense a little bit like their problem, probably a problem with their security. Now, of course, the onus for cybersecurity has very much been kind of taken onto you, as this is something you offer and security that you offer through your cloud. What kind of threats potentially? Obviously, there's a lot of money moving around. There's a lot of cash being administrated. What sort of threats are you facing in terms of cybersecurity, and how is OneTrust a better alternative, a more secure alternative than things that people might have been exposed to in the past?
Sounds like a Petros question.
Okay, so there's multiple answers to that, Harry. So we obviously take it very seriously, as anybody playing in this space does, but we come at it from multiple angles here. There's not just one answer to that. But effectively, the first part of it is we utilise all the Amazon security and protection features there. and they do a pretty good job of it, much better than I'd argue than what some of the traditional bank-owned data centres or other institution-owned data centres can do, because obviously security is paramount to Amazon themselves. So that's part of it. We make sure we configure our environments in line with best practices as espoused by AWS. But over and above that, we've got our own coding guidelines and internal security patterns and best practices that we try to adhere to. We are ISO 27001 compliant as well. We've been through the APRA ticks for security. Obviously, our customers risk assess us as well using their own internal frameworks and auditing processes. So we've been through all that rigour. And the other part of that as well is we engage suppliers to help us as well. So we've got LoopSec as well. So Dan and I were talking about LoopSec earlier. They do penetration testing for us and provide us some advisory services. And we also use another company called TSS who do a lot of threat detection and event monitoring for us. And they let us know when they see suspicious behaviour on our accounts. So we come at it from a multi-pronged approach, right? So, and it's vitally important to us. The last thing we want to do is compromise our customers' systems and their information. So it's critical to our business.
Yeah, we use cloud conformity to make sure that we've got the configuration right. TSS obviously is a massive help to us, looking at the traffic through the system and making sure that there's nothing that looks wrong that's happening. So apart from the controls that we put in place, we've got teams of people looking at this stuff all day, every day, to make sure that any spike, anything that's abnormal gets digested, analysed and flagged if there's any issues. So that's super safe, in my opinion. What we do is far away more bulletproof than what you could do on an on-prem system, because with on-prem, you've always got those people in the room. Our stuff is secure and monitored, and even the users that use it have to go through two-factor, so no one logs in without a mobile code sent to them. So we've got overlays that you don't have on those old legacy systems.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I guess the 2020 hacker movie will probably be a lot less interesting than a 90s hacker movie, but it's good to know that everyone's stuff is safe.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. You guys have spoken very nicely a bit to kind of like to your strategic partnerships and alliances and some of the things you've been doing. And Petros, you mentioned earlier the idea of always buying products kind of off shelf rather than trying to build it in house, and that always creating a better result. Or at least a cheaper result. I was wondering if you guys could speak a bit to some of your strategic partnerships and perhaps kind of the Recreo attitude towards a partner ecosystem. I think I've got a list of some of the guys you guys work with here. People like TSS. You spoke to MongoDB and Tata actually. With some people that you guys worked with. I was wondering if you guys to touch on some of your kind of relationships and your general attitude towards a partner ecosystem and the benefits that it provides.
Yeah, I think generally, I might take that one in the first instance. One of the strategic decisions we took last year was that we won't try and be everything to everyone, and by that I mean you can get quite confused pretty quickly. It's a big ecosystem of a lot of people and a lot of functions working in it, just generally across superannuation. What we wanted to do was be the best superannuation platform. We want to provide the technology, but we're not necessarily the best at everything. We're not the best at security, which is why we partner with those teams. Mm-hmm. We also need the flexibility to be able to scale up and down quickly. So guys like Tata support us. TCS have provided a lot of support for our testing up until now, and some other consulting as well. But provides us that flexibility and also longer work hours. To be honest, if you use resources offshore, you can actually run something more like a 10, 12-hour business rather than an 8-hour business.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty good. Petros, you want to add anything to that?
Just to reinforce Dan's point, we try to be really clear what we're really good at and what our IP is. Mm-hmm. And we understand that, but then there's partners there that have got their strengths, and we want to leverage those strengths as well. So security we've spoken about, Tata or TCS have got that ability to ramp up and give us resources and automation of testing and all that sort of stuff. We use MongoDB because they've got a pretty good database there that powers some of our software as well. So so that's our approach is bank on our strengths and leverage our strengths, but where we have got a gap, absolutely look to partners to fill that gap, and we want to leverage their strengths as well. I think all in all that makes Recreo a stronger platform proposition than what it would be without those partners.
No doubt. Awesome. All right.
So that applies to the software side of things as well. So we're going to try and be the best superannuation admin platform, but there's a lot of ancillary kind of functions that you could build into a platform, things like contact management, fund accounting. There's a lot of stuff that goes around it. So we're not going to try and build that. We're going to try and be the best admin platform, but we're obviously looking for partnerships around in those spaces to bring together a suite of services that we can offer to the market.
For sure. Fantastic. I guess kind of speaking of that, I was one more technology I actually wanted to really touch on is how are you guys tackling integrating RPA into what you're offering? Obviously, there's a lot of kind of process management, a lot of data entry and data retrieval going on. Are you using RPA to automate any of that stuff?
Can I take that one, Dan? So it's kind of, RPA for me is quite interesting. The short answer is right now, no. But having said that, though, where I've seen RPA used effectively in large institutions is where there's heavy human-centric processing around certain processes, right? But I think in some ways RPA is trying to cover that gap where a process hasn't been automated to the degree it can be. So you've got lots of user intervention on it, and then you've got RPA coming in trying to automate what a user would have been doing. I think my view on the platform is let's just automate through the platform itself as much as we can, and then where there's gaps, bring RPA in to supplement that. But I like to think with our platform, we're trying to have the platform itself do straight through processing as far as possible within the platform. And I think the automation and the flexibility and the configurability of our platform means we can do that within the platform itself to a large degree before having to go out to things like RPA type solutions. But having said that, in the future, where a need like that does emerge for whatever reason, because a certain customer needs us to integrate with something else we haven't integrated with, why not? We'd leverage it where we identify a need.
Rad. Awesome, guys. Okay, cool. This is where we sort of kind of switch perspectives a little bit, and we talk about what's going on in the next 12 months for you guys. Let's talk about the ways in which you want to kind of change and evolve and develop the Recreo offering, so to speak, and kind of what you're most hyped about right now, what you'd like to be the kind of the flagship development that you want to highlight.
Yeah, I'll take that one on. So we've got a large portfolio of change, you might say, over the next. I think it's about 14 months that we've laid out. A lot of it's about. So it was funny. I was going through and renaming a lot of the portfolio packages that we've got today to make them a little bit More
Jazzy.
yeah, jazzy, a little bit, something normal people could actually understand. It was funny. I was renaming one to bulletproof processing, because a lot of what we're trying to do at the moment is bed down an already good platform, to be honest. So it's a new platform. We've been around for 7 months, and we need the system as a whole to be working optimally. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like a period of taking stock to a certain extent and making sure that it's working as well as it can, but also putting a lot of those features in where you've got that wow factor, right? We've got to keep up with the market. We've got to make sure that we're talking about digital, we're doing email comms, we can do segmentation. We've got a front end portal. We can put that through a browser or a mobile phone, and we can send SMS as well as emails, notifications when things happen in the system. All that kind of sexy stuff is also on the roadmap. But it's kind of half and half, to be honest. Like, a lot of it is just making sure that the processing is bulletproof, making sure that everything that happens in the system does not cause issues in the system. So with so many processes and so many calculations happening every day, we just really need to make sure that all that stuff is bulletproof. It's simple, it's scalable, and it's secure.
Fantastic.
You got anything to add there, Petros?
No, like fully agree with Dan. I think we just have to have a platform that's robust. Nothing goes wrong with it, and also when things do go wrong, we know exactly what that was and it's recoverable.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a big part for me. I've never worked on a system where things didn't go wrong.
Jurassic Park talk.
While you try to prevent it, when things do go wrong, you want to be in a consistent state. So I think that's a lot about my focus over the next 12 to 18 months. But also, we've got one customer now, and we've got quite a good platform for them. How do we make the platform scalable now for multiple customers, and the new products that they want to bring onto it, and the new things that they want to do for it as well? I think in a sense, our technology has to be scalable, but so does Recreo as an organisation. So what does Recreo look like as an organisation when we've got 3, 4, 5, 15 customers? So there's all those aspects, which for me is quite exciting, because the technology is one part of it, but there's also organisational and operating model aspects to Recreo moving forward as well that we need to uplift and grow as well.
For sure. Let's talk about that for a second, actually. Let's talk about the human side of things. And obviously, you have one customer, and they're a very, very big customer. I Googled them. Good Lord. And even one more kind of customer on top of that could essentially kind of double the amount of business that you guys are doing. And obviously, you're built to be scalable on the technology side of things, but how are you ensuring that you're going to be equally scalable on the side relating to human capital? Dealer's choice.
I'll give that one to you, Petros. I don't run teams anymore. That's Petros.
Yeah,
that's absolutely necessary.
So a lot of our IP resides in people's heads, right? Like, I've got a lot of talented, really bright engineers and business analysts and testers, and we've got DevOps engineers. So I think for me, it's keeping those guys motivated. I effectively want them to come to work because they love coming to work, and they love the technologies they're working on, and they love the problems that are being thrown at them to solve. So, that's part of my challenge, is keeping people interested, motivated, which for the most part they are, but they all want the next challenge as well. So what is that next challenge? What is that next focus area? Which I think between myself and Dan, we kind of know the priority areas of the platform, but it's just about communicating and motivating the engineers working on this and giving them that light on the hill as well, that we're all working towards, and what the next customer service is we want to build, or the next product feature. We try to scan what's happening in industry with respect to agile ways of working and working with squads, and the Spotify model for how they do software development. But I also recognise that what works at, say, Spotify or Google or Apple might not necessarily work exactly that way here at Recreo. So there's that spin of how do we take these things happening in industry but make them fit for purpose at Recreo as well. So that's something, myself and Dan and the broader leadership team are all constantly trying to keep on top of and trying to keep abreast of as well.